Hi there, this is Sagequeen from GameTourist.com, and this is part 7 of my Adept guide for Mass Effect 2. So this is the second to last video, and so far we've discussed a bunch of things, including gameplay basics, guns, armor, bonus powers, and now we're going to discuss the question of whether to go Bastion or Nemesis for your Biotic Mastery. I see this question pop up in the forums a lot, and I think the answer is really quite clear. The answer depends entirely on you, how you play your Biotic, what bonus powers you took, and what powers you focus on. So let's take a look at the two masteries and see how they compare. Everything the Biotic Mastery does is slight. It typically only changes your numbers by a few percentage points, but that slight difference is noticeable, especially on the higher difficulties, where the tiniest of changes can make all the difference in a battle. The first slight but noticeable difference of both of the masteries is that both of them will speed up your cooldown timer by 20%. As the Adept relies heavily on her powers, this is critical. For example, with the skill of Warp, this will drop it from a 6-second recharge timer down to a 4.8-second recharge timer. Now, that 1.2 extra seconds may not seem like a whole lot, but if you're trying to strike a charging Krogan, that could be the difference between killing him or getting killed. Because this applies to all the Adept skills, it means you're able to get off your skills more frequently in a battle, thus throwing out more skills onto the enemy. In short, it makes the Adept more powerful at her game. You definitely want to level your Biotic Mastery up fully, whether you choose Bastion or Nemesis. In addition to this reduced cooldown time, both the Bastion and Nemesis also give you a bonus to health. The Bastion's bonus is 20%. Now, that's slightly higher than the Nemesis's bonus of plus 15%. Both of them also get an increase to Paragon or Renegade points. Bastion gets a full plus 100% more Paragon or Renegade points, and the Nemesis only gets 70% more Paragon or Renegade points. Now, there are a few places where having more Paragon or Renegade points may influence whether you can pull off a persuasion check, which may influence whether you can get the loyalty of a certain squad mate, which may influence your endgame run. However, for the most part, Paragon Renegade is more a roleplay thing rather than something that's going to affect your combat style. So, since there are other ways to up your Paragon or Renegade meter, this is not usually a consideration for most people. The real consideration comes down to the final bonus of the Biotic Mastery, and that's this. Bastion will give you a power duration bonus of plus 15%, and the Nemesis will give you a power damage bonus of plus 15%. So the real question is, do you need your Biotics to hit harder or to last longer? Now, the difference is slight, again, but it is noticeable. Heavy Warp, for example, will do 200 points of damage to a target. Heavy Warp plus the Nemesis specialization will do 230 points of damage to a target. That's only 30 points of damage more. Now, 30 points of damage may not sound like a whole lot, but if that's the difference between killing a creature entirely and having them still live, that creature could still put back on shields, they could keep shooting at you. If it's a Vorcha, God forbid, it will be back on its wormy feet and regenerating in no time. So 30 points may not be a lot, but it could be the difference between a dead creature and a still fighting creature. And on the other side of the spectrum, Group Dominate only lasts for 9 seconds. If you're a Bastion, however, it will last for 10.35 seconds. That extra second plus could make all the difference between two mobs finishing each other off, or the Dominate wearing off of them in time for them to come after you. Well, which one you need really depends on what you're using, and the skills we've talked about so far that are helped by added damage, that is Nemesis, are these: Warp, Throw, Shockwave, Energy Drain, Warp Ammo, and Reave. Those will be aided by Nemesis. Duration won't much affect them. The skills that are enhanced by Bastion are Singularity, Pull, Barrier, Stasis, and Dominate. They won't be much helped by more damage. So if you took Warp Ammo, Reave, or Energy Drain as a bonus power, that will likely incline you to Nemesis. Dominate will definitely incline you to Bastion. Stasis is kind of a toss-up. If you're using it as a freeze spell to take enemies out of commission, then you'd be inclined to Bastion. But if you're using Stasis for the sake of the bonus damage that you get once Stasis is done, then you may want to take Nemesis, because you don't actually want Stasis to last any longer. This would be especially true if you tend to use a skill like Warp to finish off targets once they fall to the ground. Barrier is another skill that could go either way. As I mentioned before, Barrier is more likely to get shot out than to fade away, especially on the higher difficulties. I forgot to mention that as soon as you cast any other power, Barrier will end. It's sort of like pulling your energy off of Shepard and then throwing it out onto the field. As a result, you rarely see Barrier end naturally. It tends to be a skill to get you out of high-risk situations to safer spots. In my opinion, Barrier is most helped by being fully evolved into Heavy Barrier so that it can soak up more damage. Nemesis won't affect Barrier at all. Bastion will only affect it should it happen to end naturally, which doesn't happen that often. So in my experience, Barrier is one that doesn't get a whole lot of benefit from either Biotic Mastery. One skill I particularly look at is Singularity. If you're primarily using Singularity to set up combos, especially Singularity plus Warp, then Nemesis is a good choice for you. This is the case if you're using Singularity kind of like a net, where you throw it out, catch someone in it, and then harpoon them with Warp. If you rarely see Singularity end naturally because you're the one who's detonating it, then Nemesis is probably a better choice for you. But if you're setting Singularity down like a pit trap, hoping some unsuspecting souls will tumble into it, and if you're using skills like throw and pull to yank enemies into Singularity's orbit, or if you're putting on barrier to jump up and shoot enemies in Singularity, then the Bastion is the better choice. The person who tries to get Singularity to last as long as possible so they can get the maximum number of targets to fall into its gravity well is the person who will likely go for Bastion. So simply put, if you want duration on your skills, and that's mostly going to relate to Singularity and Dominate, perhaps to Stasis and Barrier, and perhaps to Pull, then opt for Bastion. If you want that extra damage because you're someone who favors a more aggressive style of adepting, then you probably want to go with Nemesis. So there you go. The answer is simple. Look to what you play and choose based on that. The final consideration is roleplay. There are a number of people who choose Nemesis just because it sounds cooler and more aggressive, and some people who choose Bastion because that just sounds more like what their shepherd is. That is also a perfectly legitimate reason. One last note is how to level up your other skills. Generally speaking, the highest evolution of any power will give you a choice between the heavy version first, that is more damage against a single target, or a wider or field version, which usually impacts multiple targets. The decision there is really going to depend upon the difficulty level you're playing at and your gameplay preference. Most skills require busting through protection to affect targets, so as a broad generalization, heavy is usually better suited for taking down enemies one at a time on harder difficulties, and the wider versions are usually better suited to mass murder on lower difficulties. But there are always exceptions to that rule. I myself focus on taking down the protections on multiple enemies with the help of squad mates, and then sending them flying with a wide Singularity. And as I mentioned before, you'll only get 51 skill points to spend on your powers. That will keep you from reaching the highest level for each skill. To level a power to its full, you have to spend 10 points in it. That's 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 points. That leaves you a few possibilities for leveling Shepherd. I'm going to mention just two. One option is to level 3 skills fully, 3 skills to level 3, 1 skill to level 2. That will give you no points left over, and everything will have been unlocked. Another option that will use all your skill points is to level 5 skills fully, put 1 point into 1 skill, and then ignore a final skill entirely. This tends to be a very popular option for insanity builds, where it's very important that you level all your skills fully to get the maximum power out of them. Now, since you want to max out your Biotic Mastery, just really do yourself a favor and do that. The next question is whether you need to fully max out your bonus power or not, and you can see the previous video for tips about that decision. You most definitely want to max out Singularity. It's your unique power. It doesn't really work very well in the lower levels. It's foolish not to. So from there, you can decide whether you prefer throw to pull, if you feel like unlocking Shockwave or not, and you can check out the internet for some ideas about Adept builds. Again, I really feel that the best Adept build is the one that is fun for you to play on the difficulty you chose to play on. Alright, so that's it for Adept builds. I hope that has helped you get some tips for putting together your own Adept build. In the next and last video, I'm going to take my Adept out for a spin, showing you my favorite approaches to combat. As I've said before, I play my Bastion Barrier Adept as a biotic quarterback from American football, and I have her make plays to strategically take out enemies on insanity difficulty. I'll be showing you her favorite plays out of her playbook in the next video. From Game Tourist, this is Sagequeen. Happy hunting.